Well, hello. Man, you're looking good. Here's the deal. Wherever you are joining us today, Kenosha campus, Racine campus, if you're watching us online, listening to us online, I want you to know I love you. I'm so glad to have you part of Great Lakes Church, and we want to welcome you. Now, I know that many of you have heard this multiple times. You've seen it in email. You've heard about it in different announcements that have been done live. Maybe you've watched it on video live. But I am going to repeat it so nobody misses it. On Wednesday, May 25th, the last Wednesday of May, we are going to have our regular Wednesday evening service, which takes place every single week at our Kenosha campus at 6:30 p.m. All right, so if you're new around here, our Weekends on Wednesday service is the very first service of the week. It only takes place at our Kenosha campus. It's identical to Sunday morning. The only thing that's different is about once a month we give away a Tesla. Other than that, everything is the same, all right? And so we are meeting on Wednesday, May 25th. On Sunday, May 29th, which is Memorial Day weekend, we are not meeting in person at our physical locations because we are going to have a special online service that we're going to stream at 9 and 10:30. We've never done this before, all right? So that's why I'm repeating this information. But the reason we're doing it, had several people say, why are we doing this? It's because the very first week of June, first Wednesday in June, first Sunday in June, we're doing a big summer kickoff. A big thing for our kids, for our students. We're going to kick off a new series for our adults. And so we just decided, man, let's give everybody the week off that Sunday. And then boom, the next week, we're kicking off summer at Great Lakes Church. Are you ready? All right, we got about 6 people who are ready, but we're going to do this thing. All right, now, today what we're doing is we're continuing a teaching series that we've been in for several weeks called Freedom. All right, the thing we've been doing in this series is we've been looking at various issues, various things that trap us, that imprison us, that hold us captive. And so we're going to talk about something today that has the power to do that. And I'm just going to let you know up front that what we're going to talk about on the surface probably doesn't seem like that big of a deal. It's possible that at some point in this talk, you're just going to kind of say, hey, Dave, I don't know why we're talking about this. I see it's an important issue, but I just don't see why it's that big of an issue. But I promise you, it is a big, big deal. It's kind of like the box jellyfish, all right? When you look at the box jellyfish, it don't look like that big of a deal. Right? It looks like this blob floating through water, but it is incredibly dangerous. All right, the blob or the box jellyfish has venom that is powerful enough to instantly paralyze or kill you. Maybe you were married to someone like that before, all right? But they contain, these jellyfish, toxins that attack your heart, nervous system, skin cells, and just kill you. I mean, think about this. Sharks worldwide will kill about 10 people a year. That's it. The box jellyfish will kill somewhere, and these are conservative estimates, somewhere between 50 and 100 people every single year. And they live in the shallow waters of Lake Michigan. No, they live primarily in waters off the coast of northern Australia. Now, knowing that, if you're in northern Australia and you see a sign at the beach that looks like this, you're staying out of the water. Right? Because that's the wise thing to do. You're not putting yourself in danger, especially if the rumor is there's multiple box jellyfish in that area. And so what I want you to know is today's talk is meant to be a warning sign. Again, talking about something incredibly dangerous. And when venom gets inside of us, there are all kinds of symptoms. In fact, what I'm going to do is I'm going to read you a list of the symptoms. And then at the end, I'm just going to say, what is it? And my guess is you will know what it is. All right? Now, it's a long list. So here we go. When venom gets inside of us, it keeps us from celebrating other people's successes. It keeps us from initiating an apology even after we know that we're wrong. It keeps us arguing our point long after we realize we don't even have that good of a point. It's the thing that keeps us from admitting when we're lost. It keeps us from seeing or acknowledging our weaknesses. It's what keeps us from asking for help. It keeps us from admitting that we don't know what we're doing, even though everybody else already knows that we don't know what we're doing. It keeps us from being honest with ourselves and with others. It keeps us from asking questions. It causes us to feel good when other people fail. It causes us to close up when we should be opening up. It causes us to cheat before we allow ourselves to lose. It causes us to lie about our past. It causes us to always have to have the final word. It's what causes us to buy things we don't need to impress people who aren't even paying attention to us. Any guesses on what we're talking about today? Pride. Yeah. And obviously, we're not talking about the healthy kind of pride where we're confident in who we are, or we have admiration towards someone because of something they did or because of a character trait that they evidenced. We all know we should absolutely feel proud of ourselves. We should feel proud of our kids when we work hard to achieve or accomplish something. But the kind of pride that we're talking about today is the kind of pride that has the power to imprison us. It has the power to cause all types of destruction. So 3,000 years ago, King Solomon of Israel, he writes about this kind of pride, and he describes it this way. He says, pride goes before destruction, and haughtiness before a fall. Pride goes before destruction. So if you walk down the path of pride long enough, it will lead to disaster and ruin and chaos. In another one of his writings, King Solomon writes that pride leads to disgrace. It leads to shame, leads to embarrassment, leads to loss of respect, which leads to the obvious question. If pride is that destructive, right? If it leads to destruction and disgrace, why in the world would we ever allow it into our hearts? Well, the answer is because, quite honestly, most of the time, we don't even see it. We do not see pride in ourselves until the damage is already done. Now, what's interesting is we have absolutely no problem seeing it in other people. We just don't see it in ourselves. I mean, you can imagine over the years how many people have reached out and said, hey, Dave, can I meet with you about something? A marriage issue, parenting issue, financial issue, got an addiction here that I want to deal with. Emotional issues they want to talk about, mental health issues. In all of my years of being a pastor, nobody has ever reached out to me and said, hey, Dave, can we set up a time to meet? I just want to talk about my pride. Never. It's so easy to see in other people, almost impossible to see in ourselves. And the reason why it's so hard to see in ourselves, I think, is we have this assumption that pride is this over-the-top arrogance, right? That someone who has lots of pride in their life is always going to be talking about themselves. It's going to be someone who it's just so clear that they think they're superior to everybody. They go through life with a sense of entitlement. They have to be the center of attention. And certainly that would fall into the category of pride, no doubt about it. But the pride that most of us struggle with is way more subtle and way more sinister than that. It's the kind of pride that just slowly creeps into our heart. And over time, what it does is it gradually diminishes us. And we don't even realize when it's happening. It diminishes our capacity to admit when we're wrong. It diminishes our capacity to apologize. It diminishes our capacity to acknowledge others. I mean, pride is so powerful. It just creates layers and layers of emotion that make it difficult to say what actually needs to be said. That's why when pride makes its way into our heart, let's be honest, it's hard to apologize. It's hard to use the words, I am sorry. I was wrong. Please forgive me. When someone hurts us, pride is what makes it almost impossible at times to say, I forgive you. Pride is what makes it so challenging to genuinely compliment someone. Guys, all of us, don't miss this, all of us have people in our lives who are dying for just one positive word of encouragement or affirmation. And all we need to do is walk over to them and compliment them. All we need to do is send a letter. All we need to do is send a text. All we need to do is make a phone call. That's all we need to do. And yet pride makes it so difficult, which is why when many of us, I understand that everybody falls into this category, but when many of us choose to compliment someone, it's the reason why at the end of the compliment, we attach a joke or a little sting, right? It's like, hey man, I appreciate what you did. If I had the kind of free time you had, I'd probably be doing more for others too, right? Man, I appreciate your friendship. I mean, you're a little crazy, but I appreciate it, right? There's always a little something, right? It's pride. Pride diminishes us. It diminishes our ability to hear what needs to be heard. And every one of us can point to seasons in our life where people loved us. And they loved us so much that they did everything they could do to get through to us, but they just couldn't get through. It was like their words were bouncing off. That's because pride diminishes us. It diminishes us. I've talked about before how I've gone through seasons in my life where people came around me and they said, Dave, you need help. I think about one individual in particular who says, Dave, I see what you don't see. You're falling apart. It wasn't moral issues, wasn't ethical issues that were unfolding. He just says, I'm looking at you. Dave, you need help. I said, I'll get help. I just give me some space, give me. And he said, Dave, look at me. Do you think I'm saying this because I want to hurt you? He says, I'm saying this because I love you. And because of the tone of the conversation, I finally, people have been saying things to me for months and months and months. This season where my life is just falling apart and I got the help I needed. But what pride does is it keeps us from listening to other people. It diminishes us. And again, it's hard to see. Why? Because it's subtle. And yet, make no mistake, it is powerful. Over time, it has the ability to take over our life and imprison us. So let me give you some examples of how pride does that, right? Let's talk about how pride imprisons us. One of the things that pride does is it prevents my personal growth. Keeps me from growing. Guys, think about this, right? The more pride we have in our heart, the less we're going to grow. Which makes sense because pride in and of itself makes me unteachable. So let me just ask you, how willing are you to be corrected? How active and intentional are you seeking out wisdom and guidance in the areas you need it most? I mean, pride is what's keeping us from getting help in our marriage when we know it's not going well. Pride is the thing that causes us to downplay our addictions and keeps us from seeking recovery. Pride is what keeps me from acknowledging I don't have a clue what I'm doing financially and I need help. Pride prevents personal growth because it keeps me from listening to others and from seeking out help when I need it. Because if the only person that you can learn from is you, I mean, you're smart, but you're not going to learn very much. And so what needs to happen is I need to invite people to speak into my life who are going to challenge me and correct me. King Solomon put it this way. He said, people who accept discipline are on the pathway to life. But those who ignore correction will go astray. So let me ask you, how do you respond to correction? Do you get defensive? Do you get mad? Do you always point fingers and think it's the other person's problem? Pride prevents my personal growth. Another thing that pride does and how it imprisons us is it shuts others out. Now, you know this is true. Pride causes conflict. It holds grudges. It thinks my schedule is more important than your schedule. Pride won't allow me to forgive. It keeps score. It blocks me from listening to others. It makes me think I'm better than you. It causes me to be uninterested in you. It won't let you speak into my life. It convinces me that I'm right and you're wrong on every single issue we discuss. Pride just has no tenderness to it. It has no grace to it. Pride crowds other people out because when you're full of you, there is no room for anyone else. This is why James, the brother of Jesus, in one of his writings, comes right out and says it. He says, God opposes the proud, but gives grace to the humble. That's pretty intense language. God opposes the proud. That's like, if you are a person filled with pride, you're picking a fight with God. I don't want to be that person. Right? God opposes them. He doesn't bless them. He doesn't honor them. He opposes them. And I understand that. You should understand this, right? If someone does something hurtful to the person you love, right, which pride does, it hurts the people. If someone hurts someone you love, you oppose them. I remember years and years and years ago, I was living in North Carolina. My sister was living with me at the time. She was a cheerleading coach. And she came home. She must have been 19 at the time, maybe 20 at the most. And she came home about 8, 9 o'clock at night, and she was crying. I asked her, hey, what's wrong? Why are you crying? And she said, because today was the day I had to make cuts for the cheerleading squad, and I cut one guy's daughter, and when he found out, he came in and he reamed me out. And I said, do you know the guy's name by any chance? And she said his name, and I was like, are you kidding me? I know this guy because he went to the church that I was on staff at. So I got out the phone book back in the day. That's what you had to do, right? I got out the phone book. I looked up this guy's address. I kid you not, 9 o'clock at night, I ring his doorbell. He comes to the door. He opens it up, and he says, Pastor Dave? I said, Barry, you think you're a big tough guy, don't you? You looked at my young sister, 19, 20 years old at the time, right? You looked at my young sister, and you had to make her cry because your daughter wasn't qualified enough to make the cheerleading squad. Now, I'm sure he was real intimidated by this. I'm sure he was like, oh, right? But he says, Dave, would you like to come in? And I am not making this up. I walked inside. I said, absolutely. And I looked, and it happened to be, even though it was like 9 o'clock at night, the lead pastor of that church was at his house just hanging out with them, having dinner. And he says, Dave, what do you want to talk? I said, well, I don't want to talk about anything anymore. I think I'm good. Right? But you stand up for people when they're hurt. And so God opposes the proud. Why? Because pride destroys relationship. It hurts people. Do you realize almost every single relationship conflict could be resolved if just one person would swallow their pride and say the words, I am sorry. Or they'd ask the question, will you forgive me? But just like you, I've had relationships that I let experience tension for years and years and years because those simple words were so difficult to speak. Pride poisons our relationships because it keeps us from admitting mistakes. See, I think all of us think, if we admit to something, people are going to think less of us. We think it reveals a weakness, but the exact opposite is true. The more authentic, the more honest, the more upfront, the more humble we are, the more people respect you. I mean, one of the greatest examples of humility would be Mother Teresa. Did people think that she was just a doormat that people walked all over? How could she ever allow herself to spend her life helping people? And no, there was a deep respect. Another way that pride imprisons us is it shuts God out. Why? Because pride makes me the center of the universe. Why would I ever make room for God if my entire world is about me? See, this is why King David of Israel writes, in his pride, the wicked man does not seek him. In all his thoughts, there is no room for God. There's a whole lot of people who convince themselves that it is their intellect that has pushed God out. They've read a bunch of books, they've watched videos on YouTube, they've talked to people, they've studied different religions, and as a result, they've convinced themselves that they have pushed God out because of their intellect. I couldn't connect all the dots. I am done with God. And I want you to know, it's totally possible that someone can push God out because of their intellect. I get that. And if that's you, I am not making fun of you. I am not discounting that possibility. But I am going to say this. If in addition to stiff-arming God because of your intellect, you also have the tendency to stiff-arm the people you love the most on a regular basis with your intellect, and it's always a debate, always a fight, then I'm just going to be this honest with you and say, you don't have an intellect problem, you have a pride problem. See, pride is a prison, right? It shuts us in, and it shuts God and others out. And it's not the intellectual side of things that keeps us from saying the things that we need to say and asking the things that we need to ask and listening to the things we need to listen to and apologizing when we need to apologize and admitting we're wrong when we need to admit we're wrong. Intellectually, we're smart people. We know all of those things are true. We feel them down here. The real challenge is that there are layers upon layers upon layers of emotions that have just slowly built themselves up around our heart, and they've imprisoned us to our pride. And so the key to real freedom is humility. Should make sense, right? What's the key to freedom? It's humility. In fact, Peter, who was one of the disciples of Jesus, he wrote this. He says, humble yourselves under the mighty power of God, and at the right time, he will lift you up in honor. I love this. He says, humble yourself. Nobody can force you to be humble. They can humiliate you, but they can't humble you. That's a choice. So how do I humble myself? There's lots of ways we can humble ourselves. You know, every time we pray, we're humbling ourselves. Every time we pray, what we're doing is we're saying, I acknowledge the fact that I cannot do life alone. I cannot simply rely on my wisdom, my power, and my strength. I need God. Every time we pray, we are acknowledging our dependence on God. That's humility. Every time we serve another person, every time I do something for another individual, I am humbling myself. Every time I give, every time I express gratitude, I say thank you to someone. Every time I confess a wrong, I'm humbling myself. I say, hey, I am not perfect. I am acknowledging, I'm not. Every time I compliment someone, I am humbling myself. See, proud people want you to think better of them. Humble people want you to think better of you. They want you to leave feeling inspired and encouraged. The Apostle Paul, in one of his first century letters, he writes this. He says, don't be selfish. Don't try to impress others. Be humble. Again, this is a choice. Be humble, thinking of others as better than yourselves. Don't look out only for your own interests, but take an interest in others too. Now, maybe you've heard this before, but I think it's an incredible phrase that's worth getting into our minds as it relates to humility. Humility is not thinking less of ourselves, right? It's not just walking around with our head to the ground. And he says, very simply, be humble, thinking of yourself. Don't be selfish. Don't try to be humble, thinking of others as better than yourselves. And what he's saying is, hey, you can think fine of yourself. You can think high of yourself. Like, you can be confident in who you are. So humility isn't thinking less of myself. It's just thinking of myself less. He continues. He says, you must have the same attitude that Christ Jesus had. Though he was God, he did not think equality with God as something to cling to. Even though Jesus was divine, even though Jesus was the embodiment of God, right? God in the flesh, never once do we ever read about him pulling the God lever or playing the God card or pushing the God button for his selfish interests. We don't ever read about God zapping people who disagreed with him. This is why I'm not God. Right? I have no problems just zapping you. I was like, try that again, right? We don't ever read about God demanding or Jesus demanding premier seating at the different parties he attended. He never skipped to the front of the line at Disneyland and asked people to step back, right? He didn't blind the eyes of the police officers as he sped past them 150 miles an hour. He never used his power for his own selfish interests, even though he had the ability to do so. Instead, he used his power to listen, to befriend, to forgive, to reach out, to treat with dignity. And when Jesus showed up into this world, he showed up into a world that had a religious and political pecking order. It was a world where people who did great things were considered to be great people. And if you were sick, it was because God was mad at you. And if bad things were happening in your life, it was because of karma. You must have done something bad in a previous life. And in that life, you must have just been a really horrible person. There's still people who think this way today. But Jesus shows up into that world and he defines greatness. He says it's not about your achievements and accomplishments. He says greatness is not defined by how well people serve you. It is about how well you serve other people. In one of his teachings, he says, the meek shall inherit the earth. You know what that means? No clue, right? It's like, I don't know, inherit the earth. What Jesus is saying is there is an inheritance of some sort, not just in this life, but in the life to come. But even in this life, there are benefits. Meekness is strength under control. It's using our power in good ways, not destructive ways. And Jesus is saying to his first century audience, I know, I get it. You think that weak is meek, but I'm telling you, you are wrong. The meek are the people who are willing to do things for other people that nobody else wants to do. It's using your power in ways that benefit and bless others. You know, there's a really famous story that happens at the end of Jesus' time here on this earth. And without question, we miss the emotions of it. We miss the intensity of it. We miss the smells and the things that are going on. And it's a moment in which Jesus washes the feet of his disciples. And the reason it's so emotional is because he's the rabbi and the teacher, and he's washing the feet of his students. And in doing so, it's like he's saying, take that, pride. You're not going to imprison me. You're not going to get a hold of me. Take that, pride, in your face. And then after he washes their feet, he looks to his followers and he says, now that you've seen me do it, not you've heard me teach about it, now that you've seen me do this, I want you to go and do likewise. And if you will do something similar, it will break the power of pride in your life. Jesus is introducing us to a very liberating approach to humility that has the power to break through the emotional layers that hold us back and keep us imprisoned. Here's what Paul writes next. Instead, he, Jesus, gave up his divine privileges. He took the humble position of a slave and was born as a human being. When he appeared in human form, he humbled himself in obedience to God and died a criminal's death on a cross. Humble himself, taking on a human body, ends his time here on earth stretched on a cross. If we're honest, most of us will not humble ourselves to the point of losing an argument. Right? Most of us won't even humble ourselves to the point of acknowledging when we're wrong. But Jesus gives up his rights, he gives up his power, he gives up his leverage, he gives up his privileges, and he humbles himself to be one of us. That's what Jesus did with his power. Because he knew that there was a gap between God and the rest of humanity. And the rest of humanity was convinced that what they needed to do to connect with God was behave a certain way. And since they were never going to behave a certain way, they had to offer a bunch of animals as sacrifices to try to appease God and make him happy. And God says, you know what? I'll be the sacrifice. Jesus steps into that gap and initiates reconciliation. Why would he ever do that? That is not how we're supposed to act. We're supposed to wait for them to come to us. We're supposed to wait for them to call us. Right? They need to apologize to us. We're going to wait for them to come in our direction. Jesus, who was 100% wronged by others. Jesus, who was 100% in the right, initiated reconciliation. He refused to step into the prison of pride. So how has pride imprisoned you? Has it kept you from growing and moving forward? Has it pushed the people in your life who love you the most, has it pushed them out? Has it pushed God, who created you in his image and loves you more than anyone could possibly love you? Has it pushed God out? And it's not just pushing God out in the way of like my intellect, I'm done with you. There's a whole lot of people that do that. It can be as simple as when I sense and feel the prompting of God wants me to do this, my pride pushes him away and says, no, I'm not going to do that. Where's pride gotten into your heart? How has it imprisoned you? What are you going to do about it? Nobody can force you to be humble. Nobody can force me. We can only humble ourselves. Let's pray. Our Heavenly Father, we thank you for the humility that you evidenced through Jesus. We thank you for the attitude of serving and loving and caring. We thank you how over and over and over you spent your time on this earth putting the spotlight on others when it would have been so easy to put the spotlight on you. I pray, God, help us not to think of ourselves less, but to think less of ourselves, but to think of ourselves less and to think of others more. May the pride that's in our heart be stripped away so that we can grow and learn, so that we can be connected to people once again and be connected to you. In Jesus' name, amen.